It might look really good right now, but this is just epoxy. So the whole inside of the boat now sealed in 2 coats of epoxy resin. Nice thing about getting a second coat on there is it makes a lot of these fillet joints nice and smooth. So they feel much less rough. I'm not going for perfection here. And some of this stuff may look great on video, but it's really not that perfect. Yes, I don't know if it comes out well on the camera, but there's a whole bunch of runs right here in the epoxy. And I did a much better job up here. I have no runs here. This is very smooth. There's a couple bits of, dirt in here. But right here, it's all runny. And that's because whenever you're brushing on all these layers of epoxy, sometimes when you're brushing underneath or here and under here and all this, you get a little excess of epoxy. And I'd go around afterwards and try to clean it all up. I cleaned off this surface here really good, but I missed this spot. But that's okay, because this all sands out. As you can see, I had some runs in my epoxy. So it's working on sanding those out, but another coat goes on here, and this is where the fiberglass overlaps. This is the epoxy mixing station right here. Got my mixing stick, a blade to cut whenever I'm making a bag. This cup here has some wood flour in it. There's my hardener, my resin, rubber gloves, mixing cups, some more spreaders. I need to get more chip brushes, down to my last one. This is super glue and accelerant, and you actually put some of the super glue on the edge of the chip brush down here by the metal, and that keeps the bristles from falling out. These are some spreading sticks, some more filler stuff. So that's everything for mixing my epoxy. I just finished doing a little bit of touch-up epoxy work, so I'm waiting for that to dry. But while I'm waiting for that to dry, let's test fit some motors on the back here. First one here is the old 3 horsepower Johnson. The Jimmy Skiff II is rated for up to a 3 horsepower outboard. So without overpowering it, this is the biggest outboard that I can technically put on here. This is my 1958 Johnson 3 horsepower 2-stroke outboard. Part of the reason I got this motor was just to be able to try it out on this boat, because this being a wooden boat, even though it's a modern plywood kit boat, it is a wooden boat, so I thought it might look pretty cool on here. So here's Mr. Johnson mounted on the back. This is a 15-inch transom, and as you can see, this is right here, almost a little above this very bottom edge here. And this old motor does not have any adjustment for the angle, but it looks like a pretty good angle coming off of there. I think it's interesting how the prop goes at a downward angle too. But yeah, there is no, this is fixed. There is no adjusting here, I don't think. Maybe there is. Well, we can play with that in the future. But that's what it looks like on the back of the boat. I'm probably going to be painting some of these surfaces. We'll talk about that in a minute. So I think we can all agree that looks pretty cool on the back of here. Obviously, that may change with what I paint and how I paint it, but this copper color looks so cool with the wood. And the cream is an interesting choice. Like maybe I paint some of the surfaces inside a cream color so that way they kind of all match. While the Johnson might look cool, I mean, I'll agree, that thing looks great. Realistically, I'm probably going to be spending a lot more time running the ePropulsion Spirit on the back here. This is a 3 horsepower equivalent, so this motor is appropriate for this boat. Almost makes you wonder, did I have a plan when I was doing all of this stuff and getting all these motors? Maybe. This motor sits a little bit lower in the water. I don't remember if this is the short shaft or the extra short shaft. There we go. So here's the ePropulsion Spirit 1.0 Plus hanging on the back. I'll admit, it doesn't look quite as cool as the old Johnson. but I feel like this motor is going to be awesome on this boat. So right now I've got this adjusted here. I can bring it in some. I got 4 positions. I'm in position 3. But as you can see, the motor sits a whole lot lower than, what is that, my skeg? Yeah. The motor sits lower than that. But I don't think that's going to be a problem. If it is, well, then I'll get a jack plate or something to jack it up. But that's what she looks like on the back. What happens next is this all gets sanded again. Everything gets sanded with either 220 or 120. The areas that get sanded with 220 will be getting varnished, and then the areas that are going to get painted will be sanded with 120 and then primed and then painted. A lot of people leave the whole inside completely wood. While that looks nice, and like right now it looks really good, that's going to require a lot of care with varnishing all the time. And so what I'm thinking about doing is painting some of the areas that will probably get more wear than others. And the reason we have to put varnish on the areas that we keep wood is because epoxy resin is not UV protected or whatever. And no, I don't know what would happen if I just left it with the epoxy. Apparently it's bad because it doesn't have UV protection. That's all I know. If I don't want it to be glossy when I'm all finished, I'm supposed to put on a couple coats of gloss varnish with the UV protection and then some satin varnish over top of that, because apparently the satin varnish does not have UV protection for some reason. So the varnish would be on the bench going down to where this lip is for the wooden thwarts. And then below here, this would be primed and painted all the way up the other side the same way. And then up the back of the transom, maybe just leaving this plate here as wood. So I'd have 3 flat sections on the interior of the boat that are varnished, and the rest would be paint. And of course, the side pieces here, the verticals, they'll be getting paint. So we'll have wood, wood, paint, paint, paint. And maybe putting something down on the floor. As far as paint goes, I'm thinking about going with like a light cream color for all of this interior stuff. I had a poll recently where I asked people what color they thought I should paint the boat, and a lot of people like this lighter blue color. It also depends on which brand of paint I go with. The outside of the boat does not have a second coat of epoxy on it yet. And the process for the outside of the boat will be a sanding, a second coat of epoxy, and then priming and painting. I don't think it's going to take too much time to do the outside of the boat, and actually I think what I'm going to do before I start sanding the interior is I think I'm going to flip the boat and go ahead and get the exterior complete. So one of the things I do have underway is my interior storage compartment. In my first Jimmy Skiff update, I talked about making storage up in the bulkhead up there in the bow. And so this section back here is over 30 inches wide. Could actually have a nice big panel right in here to have access to this bow storage compartment. What I've done is I've cut out a rectangular square out of the front of the bulkhead, and that gives me a doorway where I can stuff all kinds of things in there. As you can see, I can put some line in here, some safety equipment, an anchor, and a full-size PFD. And that's not even filling up the compartment, because remember, I've got a camera sitting in there, so I probably can fit 2 full-size PFDs in there. I'm happy with how that's turning out, and I'm glad I went ahead and made that decision to hollow out that compartment, because for me, I think that's going to be very useful. One of the other things that got completed recently was my friend Dan made me my hull identification plate, my HID plate. A lot of people who build their own boats and do a wooden boat kit like this don't have a hull identification plate. But I went ahead and made one because I thought it would be cool. And the way Dan did this was he actually hooked up a wood burning tool to his CNC machine and was able to wood burn me in my hull ID plate, which is made out of wood. So I've attached that to the transom with some thickened epoxy resin and covered it in another coat of epoxy, and I think that's turned out pretty cool. So I've started thinking about some other things, like for example, cleats. Well, I'm thinking about putting 2 cleats up here in the bow on the flat surface. I probably need something on the back of the transom to tie the boat down. I can just run a strap around the boat tying it to the trailer, but I also could put a couple of loops or cleats. If I put some cleats on the outside of the transom, then their bolts will show through on the inside of the transom right here. I can't have this one up real high up underneath of here because my hull ID plate is on the other side of it. I haven't quite decided which way I'm going to go, but I do really like these cleats here. Now these are a lot more than regular cleats, but I like the way that they fold down flat. And up in the bow, if I have them there, then they're not going to be getting snagged on anything or causing me any trouble, except for when I want to tie my boat off. If I mount them on the back transom, I also might be able to use them to pick up the boat. This boat's not very heavy. It only weighs about 150 pounds. So having even folding cleats there to pick up the back of the boat, if I'm trying to square it up on the trailer, I don't think that's going to be problematic. So what would you do with the cleats? Would you put them on the transom, or would you put some other kind of loops on the transom? Let me know in the comments. In addition, I'd like to be able to put some lights on. I found this old bow light off of an old sailboat, which I think is going to work out great, and I can run the wiring through my bow compartment. Matter of fact, I probably could store a battery up there and put switches up there by that compartment as well. And then I just need to put a stern light back here. And this little dog leg may have a big enough surface area for that light. As far as the lights go, I probably can wait and do that after I get the whole boat done and in the water. Play around with it, enjoy a little bit first, and then come back and put in the lights. So that's it for me for this video. Here's another video YouTube has picked just for you. Be sure to check it out. It's a good one. It's relevant to this because you're watching this after all. See you in that video.